Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Kostic. I am the president of PFLAG San Francisco, where we provide education, advocacy, and support for LGBTQ people and the families who love them. Without any further ado, I would love to introduce a person who's very special to us. She is a parent, she is one of our support group members, and she is a board member of PFLAG San Francisco. I would like to introduce Tally Pinkham.
Thanks so much. Yes, I'm Tally. She, her. I'm on the PFLAG board, and I'm a parent to a non-binary trans young adult. Hi, Noah. I wanted to just touch on how some of us may be feeling right now. Of course, as allies, we want our LGBTQ plus family and friends to live their best lives, free of persecution and judgment. And needless to say, in this current climate of fear and hate, where we see legislators and other leaders removing rights and encouraging unequal treatment, we're seeking hope and inspiration. And that's why I'm so pleased to have recently learned about tonight's guest speaker. Thank you, Suzanne Stott. So I would love to introduce Ben Green. Ben Green is a transgender advocate, educator, and public speaker. After coming out at 15 in a small town, Ben devoted his career to spreading empathy, education, and storytelling about the trans experience. He's the author of the Substack, Good Queer News, as well as the book, My Child is Trans, Now What? A Joy Centered Approach to Support. And here's the book. It's great. I've read it. Fabulous. I wish I'd had it 2.5 years ago. I think I would have been a much better advocate, ally, mother. Ben is very active on the speaking circuit, having spoken internationally on topics surrounding transgender inclusion with audiences ranging from the UK's Diversity Live to NASA to Johnson and Johnson to over 100 PFLAG chapters just like ours. It's important to know that Ben is a fierce advocate for transgender youth, regularly speaking in their defense at the Missouri State Capitol. And he's always passionate about educating others from a place of compassion, no matter where they are on their journey. And it is a journey for all of us. And I appreciate all the support from friends and family that I've received and that our child Noah has received. Please welcome Ben V. Green.
Great. I'm so excited to be here. I'm trans now. What is definitely in the works. I talked to my agent about it. The market is smaller, but I'm working on it. Um, I'm so excited to be here. It's always crazy when people who aren't like my blood relatives have read my book because nobody's making them do that. That's crazy. Um, Thank you. I'm really excited. My name is Ben Green. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, and I'm seeing a surprising number of familiar faces on here. That like what a delight to see so many people that I've met over the past couple of years. It's really wonderful. I use he, him pronouns. I am a transgender advocate living right now in St. Louis, Missouri. I've been here for the last 5 years. Before that, I was born and raised in small town Connecticut, transitioned at 15 years old, went to Brandeis and met my now wife, and she asked me to move with her to Missouri when she started medical school in 2020. So I have been all over the map. Um, and tonight, my hope is that we're going to talk quite a bit about hope and joy and resilience because a lot of people are feeling a lot of feelings right now. And I get it. I'm not what people expect me to be. People hear that I'm a trans youth advocate and they say, wow, that must be really challenging. They hear that I go to the state capitol a lot. They say, wow, that's really brave. They hear that I live in Missouri and they're like, oh, do you need like a hug or a lasagna? Are you doing okay? They're expecting me to be very dour, very angry, very tired. They're not expecting a dog to walk into the room. I'm just so happy to be anywhere all the time. I'm one of the happiest people I know. And no, that is not born out of being naive or putting my head in the sand. I'm in Missouri. We don't have any sand left. I have nowhere to bury my head. I am not under any illusion about what's going on. And I am profoundly joyful. That is because that is a choice that I wake up and make every single day. I decide this is the way I want to show up. I decide this is the approach, the attitude that I want to have when I go into, even when I go to the state capitol, which in Missouri is not a good place to be, not a welcoming place, not a place where they really care what you have to say. But I even bring joy to a place like that because that's a choice that I'm making. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. My hope is to not really spend a lot of time like talking at you. I'll probably share a couple of stories and anecdotes and strategies for like maybe 20 minutes, and then I'll let you all ask me absolutely anything that you want to. I want to make sure that this time is spent in the way that's most helpful for you all. Um, so to give you a little bit of a better sense of my background personally, you've got that sense of my professional background. You see, I've written a book for parents of trans kids. I have traveled around. I public speak a ton. I have a newsletter called Good Queer News where I talk about hope. You know who I am as a professional, but you don't yet know. Maybe you're starting to get a sense who I am as a person. So I have a story that if you've already seen me speak before, I'm sorry you have to hear this again. It's short, I promise. That I think will set the tone well. When I was coming out, I was one of the first transgender people to come out that I knew of in my town, and I had no idea how anyone was going to react. So I said, okay, I'm going to play it safe and I'm going to come out over Facebook. And some of you can maybe already tell where this is going. I made my Facebook post and I said, hey, everybody, I'm Ben. I'm transgender. Here's what it means. And let me know if you have any questions. I hope you all can accept me. And in general, the response was actually quite positive. People were very kind, they were very respectful, but there was one very interesting reaction, which was a gentleman from my school who commented on my post 5 times in a row saying, call me. And I was like, okay, I have to know what this is about. So I sent him a message. I said, hey, Charlie, what's going on? And he jumped right in. He said, I'm very confused. And I said, okay, I get it. This is really new for a lot of people. Do you have maybe something you're confused about or a question I can answer? And he said, I just don't understand. How is your hair so short? And I was like, wait, what? I get that there's a lot about this that's very unfamiliar. That's fine. I'm not going to judge you for that. Have you heard about haircuts yet? Have you, has anyone told you about that? And he said, but it looks like a boy's hair. And I said, well, yeah. I went down to the barber shop and I said, hello, one men's haircut, please. And then I gave them my money in exchange for goods and services, because that's how this whole thing works. And they gave me my men's haircut. And he said, well, I think that's weird. Be who you were born. And I said, in a roundabout sort of way, that's actually very supportive. Thank you. And ultimately, we realized that he's trying to antagonize me, and I'm having way too much fun for that to work. And I'm trying to educate him, and he's too angry or scared or insecure for that to work. So we ended our conversation and we went our separate ways. We never spoke again. But I tell that story for a couple of reasons. The first is to show that I will try to answer any question. I don't care how you ask it. I don't care if it's not worded perfectly or a little too personal or a little too political. I don't care where you're starting from. I always like to say that the only question I won't answer is the question you don't ask. I mean that genuinely. Ask me anything you want to. Another reason I share that story is to demonstrate that over the past 10 years, the way I have dealt with all of the challenges that have come up throughout my transition, trials and tribulations, and outright hate and discrimination that can come along with that, the way I have dealt with all of that has been through humor. So you're correct in assuming that after a decade, I'm absolutely hilarious. We're going to have a great time together this evening. You're in for a treat. The last reason I like to share that story is because it is a perfect example of what I mean when I say I choose to be joyful, right? If I wanted to boil that story down to its component parts and tell it to you differently with a sad violin in the background, that's a story of the most vulnerable moment of my life as a young person, coming out to my whole community. I was terrified. I had spent months, if not years, preparing for that moment, hoping that it would be okay. And one of my peers took it upon himself hours being cruel to me online. It was cyberbullying, it was hostility. I could tell you a story of cyberbullying, of cruelty, of this challenging moment to mark the beginning of my transition in the public sphere. That's not the story that I chose to tell. Instead, I found the humor in that story, and I use that story to introduce literally every single presentation I give because it's disarming, it's funny, it gets people comfortable, it shows them they can ask me questions. I get to decide what stories I tell myself and how I'm going to tell them. I choose to be joyful, which means that for some stories where it could go either way, I'm going to find the absurdity, I'm going to find the reason to laugh, or I'm not going to let that story become a big part of how I view my life. You are the director in your own life. You get to decide where you point the camera. You get to decide how much airtime somebody gets. Um, Obviously, there are going to be things that happen that cannot be condensed into a charming and comedic anecdote, right? Bad stuff also happens, and I am not here to say you should just laugh at every bad thing that ever happens to you. But there's going to be a lot of stuff in our life that's a mix of good and bad, and you get to decide where you want to put your focus. So I love to share that story to kind of give you a better sense of what I'm like as a person, in addition to some of the little things about my professional background. So one of the things that I want to spend a moment talking about is PFLAG because I couldn't possibly talk about hope without talking about PFLAG and what PFLAG has meant to me. Um, in 2022, no, over 3 years ago, I was doing a lot of public speaking, mostly very corporate, and I said, I wanna be doing more. I wanna be giving back to my community, and so kind of on a whim, I said, "I wonder if PFLAG chapters would be interested in me coming and speaking for them. I wonder if that would be helpful." And so I sat down at my computer, and for over the course of a week, individually by hand sent an email to every single PFLAG chapter in the country to say, "Hey, I'm Ben Green. I want to give a free presentation for your PFLAG chapter." I was expecting I'd hear back from 10, 20 chapters. I was expecting that it would maybe keep me busy for a month or two. I have had a PFLAG presentation almost every week for the last 3.5 years. I've spoken for over 130 PFLAG chapters now. I'm starting to lose track. Some chapters more than once or more than twice. I think Clayton Concord, I met like four with you all, which you keep having me back. I'll come as many times as you'll have me. Um, I love spending time with PFLAG, and so much of my ability to be hopeful lies in the fact that every week I get to virtually or sometimes in person go spend an hour, a couple hours, an afternoon with a group of people in some random point in the country that care about building a better world for their family members more than anything else. It is amazing to be literally all over tiny towns in Valparaiso, Indiana, and Deerfield, Illinois, and Carrollton, Georgia, and all over the map, and seeing people gather everywhere and figure out how can we make our community safer for our kids. And I got to tell you, it's not just that I've been coming back to these PFLAG meetings, it's that I get to see the trends at these PFLAG meetings. I get to see that PFLAG meetings have been getting bigger and bigger and bigger and having more volunteers. A lot of chapters, especially in these red states, I have been hearing they say, "Ben, we have more volunteers than we know what to do with." My PFLAG chapter in St. Louis, where I'm now the advocacy chair, we get 10 to 20 new volunteer requests a day, every day since January 20th. Usually it was 5 a week. So many more people are saying, okay, I am ready to jump in, to get involved. So the fact that I get to be having these touch points all over the country, seeing what it looks like to have people in our corner, really getting to get a sense of how big that group is and how rapidly it's growing, how much courage people have coming in and saying, hey, I'm a pastor. I run my town in Texas's only Christian bookstore. All the Bibles in this town come through my bookstore, and my kid is trans. So I got to figure this out. I'm here to do that. or a mom who came to our St. Louis meeting and said, I, made certain electoral decisions that my family does not like. They're not talking to me anymore, and I need to understand. Can you help me understand what I've done to hurt my family? Because I want to build repair there. I want to get it. The amount of courage, the amount of love, the amount of dedication to improving our communities that I see across PFLAG chapters all over this country, that honestly, more than anything else, is what really keeps me going. Getting to constantly spend time with chapters like this one. So thank you all for being here and for having me. I can't tell you how much it means to me to be able to spend time with you all. It is really very special to me to see you all here. This means a lot. So PFLAG and getting to stay engaged and involved really does bring me a lot of hope. Now, the other thing I want to talk about this evening, I want to talk about two things: resilience and joy. And I think they're different, and I think they're both really important. With resilience, I want to take a second to talk about fear mongering, because I think it's really, really present in a way that, how am I going to put this nicely? The call is coming from inside the house. I think we all probably get that reference. Um, there are a lot of people who are trying to make us afraid. Some people we know. Some, I don't need to name any specific names for us to know certain individuals who are very explicitly clear that they'd like us to be afraid, that they would like us to feel targeted or attacked. But then there are others who also want us to feel afraid that I don't think we pay enough attention to that being a priority for them. When we think about, the news, media, social media, it's critical to me that we all understand that your despair is somebody else's business model. The more hopeless you feel, the more money they are going to make. I know sometimes this makes me sound like I got a little bit of a tinfoil hat on, but stick with me. With the news, they are in the business of selling your attention to advertisers, right? In addition to sharing the news with you, they're businesses. And so, as businesses, the way they make money isn't by you watching the news, it's you watching the commercials. So, they need you to keep watching. They need you to be engaged on the website. They need you to be sharing stuff so other people will see the ads. And they need you to keep scrolling and keep reading. And study after study finds that what gets people to stick around is bad news. If it bleeds, it leads. The scarier a story, the more upsetting, the more negative words you use in a headline, the more likely someone is to keep engaging. So even the news agencies that you generally align with, that you agree with their beliefs, it's so important that we understand that they have a financial incentive to make you feel very bad all the time. Social media is very similar, right? We've seen, obviously, Elon Musk owning Twitter. I don't think anybody thinks his intentions are good anymore. I don't really think we thought they were good in the beginning. But even a platform like Meta, which has specifically removed any policies barring LGBTQ hate speech, that was done because they recognize that when there is conflict, they make more money. They had an assessment in a team in 2020 called the Good for the World team, where they said, we don't like how much misinformation and hate, and people are getting really angry at each other on here. So they rolled out a whole new algorithm that would deprioritize posts that targeted other groups of people or that encouraged conflict. They rolled out that algorithm, and wouldn't you know it, people stopped fighting. And then they lost money. And so they deleted the algorithm and fired the team, buried all of the research saying Facebook is making people angrier, and said we might be making people angrier, but God, think of the shareholders. We need to make sure we are returning on shareholder value. So the folks at Facebook started reprioritizing the content meant to make you upset. Again, recognizing that when you see a post that's really scary, you share it, even if it's just the headline and you haven't read the whole thing. I know I've been guilty of that in my time. Or you see a post and you just know the comments are going to be horrible and you can't resist going in to check. And the next thing you know, it's 3 hours later and you have been deep in a fight. I named Steve with no profile picture who does not like the transgender community. We've been there. And while you're leaving those comments, you are watching advertisements. You are scrolling through content. You are making money. Recognizing that your despair is someone else's business model is so important. for all of us, for our resilience. That is a major obstacle to our resilience. The news is not entertainment. You got to be intentional about when we watch the news. And if it would be helpful when we go to the Q&A, I am happy to do a whole review of like, here's when and how I watch the news, but I won't do that whole soapbox unless you want it. But intentionality is going to be a big word for us there. The other thing I want to highlight is that even LGBT advocacy organizations often lean on fear mongering to drive donations or to spread the word and make sure that nobody thinks, well, it's not really that bad. And I'll give an example. There was an article that came out last week that I got a lot of calls about. It was by Erin Reed, who I think is a phenomenal journalist. I think she's a really brilliant advocate. She is a friend of mine. And she posted an article about the number of anti-trans bills she was tracking. It was a pretty short article, and there were about 850 bills. It talked a lot about the record-breaking high number of bills. 850 bills is a lot of bills, right? I felt that number in my body. It did not feel good. And it feels frightening to think about a number that high. And so I went through the article. I said, okay, what's going on here? But I recognized a similar trend this year, as we've seen a lot in past years. Those numbers are highly inflated. As a couple examples of the ways they're inflated, in Missouri a couple years ago, we had 8 anti-trans sports bills proposed, literally word for word identical, but different legislators wanted to be the one to put their name on it. They were proud to say, I want to be the one. This is Brent's anti-trans sports bill, not Adam's anti-trans sports bill. They wanted to be the patriot that did protecting girls' sports or whatever. And so there were 8 anti-trans sports bills. But every agency out there who was trying to say we're the one with the highest number of bills counted it as 8 individual bills, bringing that number up. So there are a lot of duplicates in there. There are also a lot of bills that have no path to passage that are reported on as if they're already happening. So in Texas, there was a bill proposed to make being transgender a felony. Horrifying bill that even the bill sponsor, when he did interviews, said there's no way this will pass. There's not going to be a hearing. No, none of my colleagues are interested in this, but I'm trying to start the conversation. That's still something worth being worried about. But everybody reporting on that bill said inside Texas's plan to make it illegal to be a felony. I know people who moved because of that reporting, because they were feeling so frightened. So recognizing that it takes a really long time for a bill to be passed, recognizing that from 2020 to 2023, we defeated, or they passed 14% of anti-trans bills nationally from 2020 to 2023 around the country. In 2024, that got cut in half. 7% of anti-trans bills were passed as opposed to previous years. That's an unbelievable victory. Last year, we defeated 93% of anti-trans legislation. Here in Missouri, we're getting listed as one of the worst states for anti-trans legislation, saying they've got between 50 and 70 bills going. No, we have 4. We have 4 that we're actually concerned about. But people are so disheartened by the 50, we can't get them to show up for the 4 because they say, what's the point? They're really coming for us. And that is the point, is to have so many bills that we just give up and lay it all down. But recognizing that even though those numbers, that 93% of bills that we defeated and significantly more that we then defeated in court subsequently, so many of those bills are not in effect because of our court strategy. Recognizing that even though those numbers and those victories aren't going to be making headlines, that doesn't mean they're not happening. And spending time actively looking for good news in the world around us isn't a way of saying I'm going to stick my head in the sand and pretend nothing bad is happening. It just means recognizing that by default, the only news I'm going to get is bad news unless I choose to seek out good news. And we have to have that intentionality and find that balance so we understand that the world is not on fire. The game is not over. We are still doing an incredible job fighting for our community and doing a profound amount of both court victories, harm reduction. There is so much that we have and can and are and will do to protect the people that we love. So big piece of resilience is not spending quite as much time staying informed. We have to give ourselves permission to know less, to do more. And I'm going to say that again because I think it's so important. You have to give yourself permission to know less, to do more. Nobody is helped by you staying so informed that you are totally overwhelmed, exhausted, just want to hide in a hole. Nobody is helped by that. When I go to read the news, I get in, get out, get to work. What do I need to know about what's actually happening and what needs to be done? And how can I get to that rather than reading as many articles as I can about it? So, again, if you want to talk more about the news and how to set up some of those boundaries, I can get into the weeds, but I don't want to do that unless that is the path that you'd all like this conversation to go in. One other little thing I'll share is just a brief bit about joy and the role of joy in the world we're trying to build. A lot of people like to say, joy is resistance. That is a really popular sticker right now. People love to put that on a water bottle or a t-shirt and just have that phrase. Joy is resistance. I got to tell you, the only people who I hear really saying that are mostly people who are in very comfortable states that are protecting all of their rights, that use it as a little bit of an excuse to say, I don't want to do anything. I want to be at brunch with my friends. I want to be out and proud here in Brooklyn or in LA and just saying, okay, I'm good. My joy is resistance, and that's enough. I don't need to do anything to help the other people that are suffering. And yes, it's so important to go to brunch and build community and be out and proud in public. And joy is a not the entire resistance. Being happy is not going to fix the situation that we're in right now. It's really important to find happiness. I am not saying I don't want you to be happy, but I am saying I want to make sure that we don't lean too far into joy is resistance. Therefore, I don't need to do anything because I'm happy, and isn't that enough? So the phrase that I really like to use is joy is the heart of resistance. And I know it seems like I'm splitting hairs here, but honestly, I think reframing it to say that everything that we do to try to make a difference should have joy in it and at the core of it driving the car, without saying, as long as I'm being happy, I'm doing everything that I can. So, as an example of three ways that I think joy is at the heart of resistance, the first is joyful imagination. So, we use joy to think about, what is the world I want to build? What am I hoping for? Um, Thinking about the world we're dreaming of versus just saying, okay, what do I not want? What am I afraid of? Right? There are plenty of people in social movements who are all about defense and saying, not that guy, not that thing, not this problem. And we get really wrapped up in fighting against something, that we get angry and tired because we kind of feel like we're always losing. If we're always on defense, the victories feel tiring, especially when it's not a complete and utter, defeat of our opposition. So for me, I focus a lot of my advocacy on dreaming of a better future. What is the world that I want to build? And so I use joy to imagine, people being able to express themselves in super creative ways and feeling really comfortable receiving healthcare. I use joy to imagine where I want to go rather than letting my advocacy take the shape of what I want less of. I do not want my opposition to define the shape of my dreams. They are not nearly creative enough for me to just say, well, I'll have the opposite of whatever he's having. Thanks. No, I'm more creative than that. And so are you. Use your joy to take a second and think about what you want. What do you want to fight for? And that will sustain us far better than just fighting because we're angry. Anger can only carry us so far. Um, the next way we use joy as the heart of our movements is by a joyful invitation. We use joy to help others decide to join and stay in this fight with us, right? If all I ever do, especially when I'm here in Missouri, is tell people, you got to call your elected officials. My elected official is Josh Hawley. I don't think he wants to hear from me. Now, part of my way of saying I'm using joy is knowing that I get to personally be responsible for making Josh Hawley's day a little bit worse each and every day. And that feels I know I'm not getting through to him, but I know that I'm annoying. And that's honestly better in this case. So if I'm telling people all the time, okay, we're in Missouri, all I want you to do every day is call Josh Hawley. Call somebody who does not care what you have to say, does not take you seriously, does not respect you. And that's advocacy. Great work. Pack it up. Um, Nobody's going to do that with me. Nobody wants to join this fight if I am constantly saying we need to do advocacy that feels bad. But when I invite people in to do advocacy that feels joyful, not everything is going to feel joyful. Sometimes I have to call Josh Hawley. I have to call my elected officials and leave a long, weird voicemail or do things that don't always feel amazing. But a lot of times, especially as an entry point, I can say, all right, you want to come to this event? Great. We're doing a social phone banking event. Everybody's going to come and do their 5 calls for the day, and then we're going to order pizza and get to know each other and talk about why we're deciding to do this. When I hear that there is a bill being heard at the Missouri State Capitol, the first thing I do is not look at what the bill is. Sure, I look at my calendar and see if I'm free, and then I text a group chat of all my friends who live all over the state and say, oh my gosh, who's going to the Capitol? Who wants to get lunch afterwards? Are we going to get ice cream at this one place all the advocates always go for ice cream? And so I get excited to see my friends I only get to see at the Capitol, building that community there and showing people, hey, come, we are going to have a good time together. Who wants to be in my carpool group? Who wants to be in charge of the playlist? I use joy to, as a number of artists have said, make the movement irresistible, make people want to come in and fight with me and say, okay, I want to learn how to be more loving, right? If somebody comes in and says, I want to learn how to support transgenders, and I say, I can't believe you said transgenders. That's so inappropriate. Okay, they're leaving now. They're not anymore probably interested if I'm just going to yell at somebody right away for not getting their language perfect. I have to make this a movement people want to come in and fight with me in. So joyful invitation, and that first one, joyful imagination. The last way we want to use joy in as the heart of our movements is joyful continuation. I spent an absurd amount of time, by the way, going through a list on Google of words that end in ation to come up with this list. So if you have a better idea than continuation, I am all ears. Originally, it was a very wicked theme, survivalation, but that one it didn't take as well. Nobody else got that I was doing a wicked joke. So joyful continuation is basically saying we have to use joy to sustain ourselves. We have to celebrate the victories, even the little ones, even the incomplete ones, right? As an example, we had a ruling on the federal passport executive order that said, okay, we are blocking enforcement of this order for the 2 plaintiffs in the case. That's a little win at first. Most people still can't get their passports renewed. And I was jumping up and down when we got that ruling. Lots of victories that we have, especially in the next 4 years, but also in general, are not going to feel like someone pressed an equality button and everything is fixed. Every victory is going to have a, oh, but there's still this problem, but this is why it's flawed. This is why it's imperfect. There will always be further to go. But if we never celebrate until we reach a mythical finish line, we will always feel like we're failing. So celebrating all those victories or just finding opportunities to rest and go to brunch and play a board game with your friends and tell the people around you just how much you love them. I end almost every phone call, if it's with a friend, not like, the Southwest customer support, with my friends and my family, I end most phone calls with, okay, I love you. I'll talk to you later. I am freely giving with my love because that gives me joy. I also love to feed people. Anytime there is a hearing that I'm not able to go to, that's always a really hard day for me. I always feel sad when I can't get down to the Capitol. But instead of sitting and watching the hearing and putting myself through that, I say, okay, all technology off. I tell my friends, 7:30 p.m., be at my apartment. Dinner will not be ready on time, but I expect you to be here anyways. And I'm going to cook a 3-course meal because I need to feed people. Feeding people, and that's something that brings me a lot of joy and that helps me nourish the people around me, keeps all of us going when the world is beating us down. I think about how can I bring joy to other people. So I use joy to decide where I want to go, to get other people to fight for that world with me, and to make it so as many people as possible make it all the way to that point. I want all of you to be able to see that world with me. I want you to get there. We will see it in our lifetime. I want you there with me. So that's a lot of how I use joy and hope. As you can see, I spend a lot of time thinking about it, thinking about how to do joy, how to help others do joy, and I haven't figured out all the perfect ways to just distribute joy to everyone like a fairy, but I'm certainly working on it. I'm working on my Glinda bubble. It's in R&D. I keep falling, if you could believe it, but I'm working on it. So I'm kind of gonna stop my little spiel now. I talked a little longer than I thought I would, but I'm queer, Italian, and Jewish, which is the holy trinity of verbose and hand gestures. Um, so I'm gonna pause my little spiel. I'm gonna open the floor to what you all want to hear about. What are things that would be meaningful? Do you want me to translate executive orders? Do you want me to tell you all the good news from the last week? Do you want me to talk about how to watch the news or talk about, being a trans advocate or being an author? What do you want to hear about? I will follow your lead, and again, there is nothing you can't ask me. Use the chat, come off mute, whatever you want to do, and scene. Now I'm going to be quiet and drink my water and let you ask your questions. I have a board member who seems genuinely fearful that one of her two queer kids could be taken by the president off the street and sent away. Could you suggest a good response, especially when she voices this in front of other chapter members? Um, yeah, it's a good question. A lot of people have been asking me that question. Um, I don't have a perfect answer. What I will say is that the moments where that has happened, which I'm not going to pretend that that's not something that has happened in this country and is largely specific to um, people who are not citizens of the United States. So it is very much like racially motivated and immigration like status targeting specifically, which is still not good. I'm not saying like, so we don't need to worry about it. We should be fine that it's happening. Like we should be concerned that that's happening. And there is a tremendous amount of like sometimes in the ways that we panic and in the ways that we talk to each other, we do a lot of Trump's legwork for him by giving him more power, especially more fear and authoritarian power than he actually has. His power is limited. He has lost almost every single court case that has been brought against him so far, and there's been like dozens of lawsuits, upwards of 60 at this point, that we've won almost every single one of them. And there are things that courts can do to hold lawyers in contempt. They can say, if you're not going to follow this, I will have you disbarred. Like there are significant limitations on his power that I need us to know are working. Not all of them are working extremely publicly. There are some high profile things we're afraid of. But when we say they are going to round up trans people off the streets, I can't begin to tell you how far away that is from the power that he currently has. Um, and how capable and competent and passionate our advocates and defenders are for finding ways to, if that should happen, put the full force of advocacy and fundraising into getting that person back. So I would say that like recognizing we are not at that point. Many of us are not at that point. Again, when it comes to immigration status, it's a different ballgame. It's reasonable to be afraid. I wish I had a better answer for that. And we're all in this movement together. So we need to be making sure we fight for that not to be acceptable there because we don't know if and when it will become acceptable to do to a different group of people. But right now, LGBTQ plus people en masse are not being rounded up off the streets. I have people who say, Ben, I submitted my passport application and I did it too late and the executive order went in and I haven't gotten my stuff back. Are they putting me on a list? I have people in my network who work in name change law fully and have lots of connections at passport offices. Your documents are not going on a list. Your documents are going on a pile on the corner of somebody's desk who has absolutely no idea what's going on and maybe has a job, maybe doesn't. Who knows? but the government infrastructure, the government computers are not good enough. They are so old. Anybody who's worked in government, I'm sure will tell you the same thing. Those government computers are broken. They're running like an original computer over there to keep track of their data. Sometimes I've heard from multiple federal government employees that it will just wipe out an entire database for no reason at all. They don't even do what they're supposed to do, let alone say, okay, what's our record of everyone whose birth certificate and passport and driver's license doesn't line up? They don't have the ability to do that. And when we spread fear that they're going to pick up my kid off the street for being transgender, we give them so much more power by assuming that they can do it and giving them almost permission by the amount that we talk about how afraid we are of something happen. There's a level of precision of things there, of permission that happens. Um, so that's what I would say. There's also Corinne shared some great thoughts as well. There have been discussions about this, even citizens. Yeah, there's a lot of highly racially motivated, including people just saying, you look like you might be undocumented, which is just people being super racist. Um, Especially if you are going to any kind of a protest or demonstration. Look up protest safety. Look into some details around, like, if I'm going to a protest, I am not wearing my favorite iconic sneakers and making sure everyone can see my dyed hair. I'll cover my face. I'll cover my tattoos. I will have phone numbers written on my physical body that I'm going to need. Again, look up protest safety if you are going to demonstrate. Um, and being situationally aware. Um, I wish I had an easy answer to this question. It's really hard, but in general, I would say that recognizing that right now, LGBTQ people, there are plenty of ways in which we are being targeted, and that is not one of them. And I would talk to your board member about, like, listen, you have to be like, we can't just be working our members up into a panicked frenzy about this is happening. This is so bad. They're putting us in camps. Like, there's a lot of jumping a lot of steps down the path that are all steps that we are going to fight back against at every point to say we don't want to let it get that bad. And that we have a lot of energy to push back on. Um, so I know that was a really long answer. I'm going to pause now. I hope there was something in there that was helpful. Next, I'm going to do the good news recap that somebody asked for. So, good news just from the last 1 week. Maine Governor Janet Mills, who has been notorious for going back and forth with Trump when he said, I heard Maine at a dinner of all the governors. He said, I heard Maine isn't going to follow my executive order about sports. And she said, you're right, I'm following state law, and your executive order cannot override state law. He said, well, you better follow it or I'll come for your federal funding. And she just said, I'll see you in court. She saw him in court and she won. She restored funding from the USDA. Trump was taking away school funding for food assistance and school lunches funding because they love protecting kids. And so she sued his administration for not following due process, and she won and restored access to school lunches. Nationally, we saw two big cases. We saw a blocking the enforcement of the federal passport ban for plaintiffs in that case, and they said, this passport ban is clearly being driven by animus towards the trans community, which is helpful because they're right. And is most likely going to then become a class action suit that restores all access to passports and legal document changes. As well as the Ninth Circuit of Appeals blocked the Trump administration's request to be allowed to enforce their military ban. Legislatively, Colorado removed their ban on gay marriage, and Washington State passed a bill covering 12-month hormone therapy stockpiles, which will allow patients who are worried about their long-term access to care to have a little bit more of a backup so that their care is less likely to be interrupted. Planned Parenthood of Arizona briefly announced they were halting all adult gender affirming care in an overcompliance with an executive order. And after a lot of public pushback, said, "You're all right. We're so sorry. We are restoring access to care. Nobody is making us stop doing this care yet. And so we will keep serving our community because public pressure works." That made a difference. And now the trans adults of Arizona who got their care through Planned Parenthood get to keep receiving their health care. Um, so that is just a snippet of a lot of the good queer news that is happening all around. Um, so I will share that. Next question is a great one. How do you balance your personal pursuit of joy with the responsibility that can overwhelm us as marginalized people to speak up for folks who live at different intersections than us? Oftentimes, as a white trans person, I struggle to accept that my personal joy matters in my allyship to my Black, Brown, and Indigenous siblings in the community. Yeah, absolutely. I think it is so important to recognize that we are all in this fight together, side by side, and using those same principles of joy of imagination, invitation, and continuation all the fights we're in is going to be really helpful. So, with joyful imagination, it means when I dream of a better future, I am dreaming of one that is better for all of us. I am dreaming of one that is more inclusive to my disabled siblings and to my Black and Brown siblings and to my siblings who are of religious minorities, and thinking of all the different ways that I want to build a world that is better for all of us. And there's this really cool practice that some people in social movements will do called dreaming parties. And I only learned about this a couple weeks ago, and I'm trying to still learn more about it. But essentially, it's when all different movement leaders will come together and they will do almost like improv, where it's all yes and of saying, "What do you dream of? What do you want? How big can we dream together right now?" And doing it as a group means that I know that my dreams are not, we should all be living in my, as a Jewish white trans man, ideal future. I want to be hearing from a lot of people about what they're dreaming of. And as we dream together, we can kind of develop a really strong vision of a future that includes all of us. So making sure that I have as many voices in the room as possible and am helping encourage them to share what they dream of as well with me, and building spaces where I'm a safe enough person to share that with. A lets me fight for something that is really fighting for all of us. That joyful invitation of finding ways to say, okay, how can I advocate for marginalized groups in a way that makes all of us safe? So, as an example, there are some really cool people who, a lot of people are ready to stop talking about wearing masks, which I get. And when we say, okay, nobody needs to wear any mask, if you feel sick, you should just go out and go to dinner and go to this party. And so disabled people don't get to come out anymore. They don't get to hang out because they know that their health and safety doesn't matter as much to their community. So there are people who design really stylish masks that say, okay, if you're not feeling well or you're at the grocery store in a high traffic area, it can be fun to say, I'm going to have this mask be a part of my outfit that makes my disabled siblings feel safer. Or find other ways to invite other people in to say, hey, I'm going to testify on a bill for trans rights, and there's an afternoon hearing on a bill for English language learners in Missouri. Let's all go out to lunch so I can say, everybody, we're going to stay for that second hearing later because we all need to show up and so show solidarity for each other. And then that joyful continuation as well of like, where am I giving extra love who are most affected? So whether it's, there was a bill that I know targeted trans youth in particular, that I'm going to spend extra time showing some love to the trans kids around me, or a bill that I know is going to be disproportionately affecting the Black and Brown trans community, I'll text my Black trans friends and say, hey, what is something that I can do for you right now? Or I have kind of a longer version of how I ask a person how I can help them. That's not just saying, what do you think you need? But finding ways to give love to as many of the people around me as possible, is great. To just say, how am I leading with joy in all the places I want to make change, including both for me and in building a world that includes all of us. I know that answer was a little long. I hope it was helpful. Okay. We just got Marg's question. I am an intersex person and speak at PFLAGs in Keystone and Atlanta Comfort. I consistently find that many people do not know anything about intersex conditions. Do you address this when you speak to PFLAGs? Yeah, quite a bit. It depends on what I'm coming in to talk about. If I'm doing a formal presentation about the LGBTQ community or the trans community, I will very often talk about intersex people, and make sure that, I am reflecting those experiences. Sometimes I come in as a storyteller, and so I say I'm mostly here to talk about my own experiences or about legislative. So it depends what the specific topic I am in to talk about is, because I don't like to tell other people's stories for them. But whenever I am doing an informational presentation, yeah, because I think you're totally right. I think there is either a lot of people who don't know anything about intersex people. People have learned just enough about intersex people to say, what about intersex people? But probably could not answer the same question themselves, or would say like, I don't know any intersex people, which is statistically unlikely. So yeah, I think you're spot on. I think we need to be learning about intersex identities and two-spirit identities and neopronouns and a lot of the identities that are less commonly known about, but often experienced in the world around us. We need to make sure that we deeply understand those identities. Lex from PFAG Evanston said, can I contact you? Yes, please. I want to speak for all of you. Even if I have never spoken to your chapter before, even if you want me to speak at your workplace or at a like group of friends that you have. I just love speaking. I love telling stories. I love finding ways to help people become allies or become advocates and champions or help trans and queer people build up their mental health. I'll put my contact information up on the screen in a moment. But yes, I want to speak for UP Flag Evanston. I want to speak for all of you. I just love P Flag and I love speaking. This is my dream job. Another question is, in your book, I love the passage about celebrations and large events where our trans kids can go and people would be delighted by their existence. Can you tell me about a few of those celebrations that you've seen? I'd love to organize something and I'm not sure how to begin, and Pride is just once a year. Yeah. I know my favorite one that I've seen. There's a new organization here in St. Louis that's called Proud Art. They are a monthly hangout group for trans and queer youth. They got to get parent permission because they want to make sure they're checking all their boxes. So as you're planning something, really make sure that you're aware of like what legally do I need to know about running a youth serving event. I don't know what the California laws are, but dot your T's and cross your I's and make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row. But so what Proud Art does is they have social art hangouts for trans and queer kids, teenagers here in the St. Louis area. And so often they will have trans and queer adult artists of all variety come in and spend an afternoon hanging out with the kids. So some people will do a poetry workshop or a costume design workshop or a dance party, or we'll teach them about somatic healing, or we'll say, here's what art looks like to me. By the way, I'm a queer adult. I am a positive possibility model. And I try really hard to get people from all over the city, from all different backgrounds to show up and say, look, I am an example of being a, Black trans musician or being a disabled queer poet, or whatever it is. So that space and that's what the kids wanted. That's why that mom started it, was because her kids said, I wish I had a place to do art with my friends. So if there is specific youth that you're trying to support, I would ask them, what do you want? Do you want a gaming group? Do you want a movie club or a book club? And then how can I empower you so that we can build that together rather than just saying, I'm going to build something that I think the kids are going to. I don't know what the kids in your area will want, but they do. I also want to mention that there's lots of cool ways we can also think about community safety and community security. This is always just my favorite anecdote to share that, like, when here in St. Louis, when we have events, we always are thinking about how do we keep each other safe. And so some people said, well, should we have law enforcement there? And St. Louis has a very large Black community that feels often reasonably really uncomfortable. If you have an event with two cops standing right outside the door, that means you are not having an event with the Black queer community. They are not going to feel comfortable coming to that event. So instead, we have our local chapter of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, the Southern Illinois Illinois Sisters or the Soil Sisters. And one of them specifically has her mission focused on community safety. She does security for all the events. So her name is Sister Gay Bitch Milkshake. She comes in full drag and packing the heat. And I feel very sad to Sister Gay Bitch Milkshake and her very large spiky crown. And so she comes and does community safety for a lot of our local events. And that's such a cool way of thinking about like, hey, let's get creative with finding ways to make sure that everybody feels really comfortable attending this. So in different parts of the country, you're going to have different considerations of like, okay, if I live in a really, really Jewish area, I'm not going to hold Friday night events because, they're more likely to be busy doing Shabbat. Or if I live in an area where I know that people are going to be like really uncomfortable coming if there are cops there, I'm not going to have them there. So knowing your people and what they need to feel comfortable and asking them, what do you need to feel comfortable? And recognizing that it'll take a little bit of time to build that up. Exactly as Mark said, teenagers are suspicious creatures, and you are at war with their phones and their video games and a lot of things that are hard. Um, I got a great question of, do you work with trans young adults to encourage them to be mentally healthy? And would you present to an LGBTQ center on a college campus? Heck yeah, I would. I love helping trans and queer young people learn how to be resilient, learn how to resist fear mongering, learn how to get involved and make a difference. I made a lot of mistakes as a young queer activist. In short, I burned myself out really, really bad because it didn't occur to me that I was going to grow up. So it didn't occur to me to care about anything long term. Why would I bother with preventative health care or taking a break if I only thought I was going to exist for like 5 more years? So I was perfectly willing to just use up all my energy, give everything I had to everyone around me, and to say I'm just so excited to be having all these adult responsibilities. I didn't notice I had grown up and lost my childhood until it was already too late. So I love working with trans and queer young people and young adults to show them how to, show up in a way that is sustainable for them.
Thank you so much, Ben. This is really a wonderful talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember, everybody, joy is a choice that we have to make for ourselves. Nobody else is going to choose joy for you. We are in this for a long haul. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And you don't have to martyr yourself to make a difference. No movement is better off if you're miserable all the time. You're allowed to have a good day. You're allowed to take a break, take a vacation. You're allowed to be happy, even if there's someone else who isn't. We are going to get there by taking care of ourselves, by taking care of each other. I am profoundly hopeful, and you all are the reason I get to keep saying that. So thank you all so, so much.